Hi guys, welcome to this VWTTC workshop. My name's Rick. My name's Rich, not Rick. Rich. I'm the founder and head coach of RIAK Fitness, a triathlon cycling and running coaching company. I'll be leading tonight, this afternoon's group ride. Gosh, I can't talk today. Basically, guys, we're here to answer questions, but most importantly, just to kind of give you a little bit of advice about how to manage your effort and things like that, depending on which championship you're doing. Obviously, there are several different championships, 3 hours up to 24, and they're very different races. So we'll be talking a little bit about how to manage each of the different time durations. So yeah, should be hopefully an interactive session, guys. So if you've got questions, feel free to unmute yourself at any point, or you can use the chat function in Zoom. If you're joining us on IndieVelo, we've got less than a couple of minutes before we get going. I'm wearing a lot of clothing because I'm a bit under the weather, I'm afraid, so my power won't be particularly impressive today. I'll be pootling around. But the course that we're riding over, excuse me, is here's the course that we'll be using next weekend. Okay, so it's the coastal route. It's very flat, but you can see there's a couple of little rises in it, which actually, I know you'd like it to be as flat as possible, but actually I think having a little rise in it is a good thing. I was thinking about this earlier, having a little rise and just having a little bit of a break up of the course will be good. We're only doing 2 laps. So you see we're looking to about 33k. I'll be on for an hour, guys. So here we go, less than a minute before we kick on. We've got the rubber banding effect on, so we should all stay together. So be nice and chilled, guys. Just ride at whatever effort you want. So about 30 seconds. So just start off nice and easy to begin with. Get warmed up. If you are looking for a little bit of a session, by all means, do feel free to go to the front and drive the pack on. But otherwise, I would suggest just taking it nice and easy. Here we go then, guys. Last few seconds before we get going. Okay, off we go then. So I just noticed my cadence sensor hasn't connected, so just connecting that up quickly. Hopefully you've all found IndieVelo easy enough to get involved with. For anybody that is used to Zwift, hopefully you find that IndieVelo is nice and easy to use. It's very similar to Zwift. Just need to pick my effort up a little bit. This started pretty quick. Let's just get onto the back of the group. There we go. Back onto the group. Hopefully you should be able to relax from here. So yeah, guys, one of the main things I'm going to talk about this afternoon is pacing. It might sound like a really obvious, particularly for the 12 and 24-hour ones. It's quite a difficult one to get right. Basically, my main message to you guys is do some sort of planning ahead of time, okay? So if you've done similar sort of events before, go back and look at your data. Have a look at sort of what power you are holding in those events, but also look at how well you're able to hold that power So for example, if you raced the VWTTC last year, have a look at how consistent your power was. Because if it wasn't consistent at all, that would tell us that perhaps you're trying to hold too high a power, and you just need to be a little bit more conservative in your approach. Whatever the kind of conclusion is, have a look at your previous data, have a look at analogous data, and yeah, because these things can be really helpful. Start to get a bit warm. But just as some rough help, I'm just going to talk through the different races and how you might like to approach it. Going to do that with the help of my trusty power zones chart. Nope, not this one. Here we go. Okay, so this is a power zones chart based on the Coggan methodology. So these power zones are all set as percentages of FTP. Okay, and you can just see how they roughly break down. So when it comes to the 3-hour event, that is our shortest event for the weekend, 3-hour time trial. And that really, if we've got any triathletes on here, or any that's done triathlon, you know, you're talking sort of a half Ironman type distance, that sort of type of effort. Obviously you don't have to run afterwards, so you can take your half iron distance effort and just increase it a little bit, then yeah, you're getting to the right ballpark. But just to be a bit more helpful, so we are looking at this zone 3 area for the 3-hour event. Okay, so you're looking for somewhere between probably about 75 and 85% of FTP for that 3-hour championship. Okay, so you should be able to hold a relatively strong power, but for the majority of the race you do want to keep it sub-threshold, so you do want to keep it below FTP. Okay, so somewhere about 75 to 85% of FTP. Now, in order to kind of gauge what you're like over similar distances, there is a fantastic piece of free software called Golden Cheetah. Okay, and that can be really useful for doing kind of analysis of rides, looking at historic data. So Golden Cheetah is the name of that, totally free. But what you'll be able to do there is just look at what sort of power you're holding on similar distance rides. So I imagine most people will have done sort of 3-hour plus rides in the past. Probably not full effort, but you're able to see kind of what power you are holding for those rides, and then, you know, just increase it a little bit. But as I say, we're looking for the 3-hour championship. You're probably looking somewhere between about 75 and 85% of FTP. Where you sit in that range depends on your fitness level and experience level. If you're less experienced, I would start towards the bottom end of that range, so around 75% of FTP, and build steadily and look to finish really strong in that final hour, half an hour. Okay, so that's for the 3-hour championship. That would be my rough kind of guide to you, somewhere between 75 and 85% of FTP. Okay, just a very general guide. If anyone's got any questions on any of this, guys, do feel free to shout out. As I say, you can unmute yourself and ask away, or use the chat feed in Zoom, and I'll answer your questions. So then if we move on to the 6-hour, and very quickly you get into quite a different type of race. Again, for any triathletes, 6-hour, you're looking at sort of Ironman race pace. In terms of power range, you're much further down on this training zone chart. You're into zone 2, and maybe if you're really strong, onto like the cusp of zone 3. So probably looking at around 70 to 80% of FTP for 6 hours. Okay, and even at 70%, that's quite a high power to hold for 6 hours. So you've got to be confident in your ability. All right, but as I say, guys, I'd have a look at what you've done before, just to kind of check your, just to check how realistic those sort of power numbers are. If I'm saying 70 to 80% of FTP for 6 hours, and then you look at a ride you've done before, which is maybe 4 or 5 hours, and you're nowhere near that power and you're absolutely knackered, then it will tell you actually 70 to 80% of FTP. It's just not realistic for you, unfortunately. That's not a big deal. Also, a big factor, of course, is going to be fueling, which I'll talk about a bit later. But the 3 hour fueling is less of an issue. You still need to fuel and hydrate, but it's less of an issue. Whereas for the 6 hour race and onwards, fueling and hydration are massive, guys. Okay, I will talk about that in a bit, but there's just a bit of pacing advice for the 3 hour and 6 hour. Okay, so for 3 hour, as I said, 75 to 85% of FTP. For the 6 hour, 70 to 80% of FTP. And then when we get to the 12 and 24 hour, that's where it gets much less scientific, I can give much less detailed advice, because that's when fueling, hydration, fitness levels, how you manage yourself in the day, that's when they start to come into play. Okay, but you are very much going to be in that zone 2 area. So I would suggest you probably want to start somewhere around 60 to 65% of FTP. Okay, that is slap bang in the middle of zone 2. That is the area where you're going to be leaning on fat for energy the most. Okay, so I'd start somewhere around there, and then I'm afraid from there it's mostly just about managing it. Okay, and one of the reasons I would say, so we're on the route, if I come back to the course to Indy Valley, we're just coming up to a little rise here. It's not long, it's just a little rise, but it's an opportunity to get out the saddle, just kind of move around a little bit. So you'll see at the bottom, kind of the bottom left of my screen, you see the little red arrow. That's where we are at the moment. We're just starting. It's just a little rise. It's not a proper climb. It's just a little rise. But it might just force you to change gear. And as I say, actually might become a bit of a welcome distraction on each lap. Just an opportunity to get out the saddle and have a bit of feedback there. Opportunity to change gear. And then obviously you've got the other side of the rise, where you've got a little downhill to recover. So just having this little break on the course, I think, will be actually quite welcome. So when we did it last year on Wahoo RGT, we also did it on the Brago Springs course, which is perfectly flat. Very little gradient change, so not much in terms of interruption. And I think that actually can work against you, because there's just no relief. There's no relief for your muscles. They're constantly working in the exact same way for several hours. Whereas at least with some sort of little rise, gives you an opportunity just to change up the rhythm a little bit, and that matters. Okay. So just nice and relaxed, guys. So yeah, with the 12 and 24 hour race, pacing strategy is more going to be depending on how you feel and your heart rate. Okay, so if we go back to our little chart, this is when we're going to start to look at the far right column where it says percentage of functional threshold heart rate. So hopefully when you've done your FTP tests, you will know roughly what your threshold heart rate is. For most people, it's somewhere around 160 beats per minute. Okay, but hopefully you know a bit more accuracy than that. But yeah, for the 12 and 24 hour event, I would suggest perceived effort and heart rate are going to be increasingly important. Okay, because what you'll notice more and more in the 12 and 24 hour race is what we call cardiac drift. And that basically means that for the same power, your heart rate increases. So when you start to get tired, you might be able to hold the same power, but you're actually working harder in order to produce that same power. So that's something to really keep an eye on. Okay, so although your power might be kind of in the right area, your heart rate might start to increase. And what you want to keep an eye on is that heart rate stays within that sort of zone 2 area. So somewhere between 69, around 70 to 80% of threshold heart rate. Okay, so if you're, I can't do the maths. Let me get a calculator. What would that be if we're, just bear with me 1 second. So if your heart rate, let's say your threshold heart rate is roughly 160, so times 0. What should we say? 0.7. So you're talking somewhere between 110 beats per minute, roughly, and 130. Okay, so this is just a general kind of illustration, guys. But if your heart rate, threshold heart rate is around 160, you want your heart rate to stay within about 110 to 130 beats per minute. All right. Obviously, you apply that to your actual threshold heart rate. But yeah, for the 12 and 24 hours, that's where you want to keep your heart rate. So obviously you want to keep it on your power, and hopefully that stays sort of around 60-65% of FTP. But seeing how that lines up with your heart rate, I think is probably the most important thing. Okay. Oops. Dropped off the back of this group here. The pace in the group is a little bit high. Let's just try and get back on. So because it was the online events company and not RIAK that set up this event, I can't adjust the strength of the rubber banding. So I think so that's why the group is just breaking up a little bit. There we go. Stay with the group now. So as I say, pacing for 12 hours, 24 hours, it's not as simple as hold this percentage of FTP, because there's just way too many variables. Keep an eye on your heart rate, keep an eye on how well you're producing the power, but also keep an eye on your cadence. And this goes through all of the races, really. You want a nice, efficient cadence. So what we often see actually when we do these races is that people's cadence gets really low. As a general rule, you want to try and keep your cadence upwards of 80 RPM. So somewhere between 80 and 100 RPM. Okay, that's where the vast majority of us are most efficient. So just try and stay disciplined on that side of things as well. Because if you don't, guys, what happens is, because there's a sort of, typically the default setting is for a 3-second smoothing. What that means is your power comes back to you in feedback wise as a 3-second rolling average. And so if you compare riding at 60 RPM and 80 RPM, at 60 RPM for that rolling average to hold power, you're having to put out more power per pedal stroke than if you're at 80 RPM for that same power. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically what you need to know is keeping your cadence somewhere between 80 and 100 RPM. As I said, a general rule for cycling full stop is good advice, okay? And good place to be. If anybody wants that chart, this power zone chart, by the way, I am very happy to share that with people. Not that one, this one. If anyone wants a copy of this chart, so you can have it next to you as you're riding, and maybe you can just sort of write in your own details. Very happy to send that to people, by the way. We can make it available on the TOEC website as well. So just let me know if anyone wants that. But guys, on pacing, I know we have to keep it quite general because obviously it's very individual as to how you're going to do it. And I will talk a little bit about fueling and hydration because they are, as you get to 12 and 24 hours, they are even more important and really big factors over and above pacing because, yeah, you're going to be riding at a pretty easy and consistent power. But has anyone got any questions on pacing and how to manage their effort?
Is the draft going to be turned off?
Yes. Yeah. So draft will be off. It's a time trial, so draft will be off. But obviously you can still use each other to motivate one another. And you'll be able to see. If you want to get a feel, guys, for how the dynamics will work, we're running a test event for the virtual hour record next Wednesday at 19:30 GMT. So actually no, sorry, we're running 3 different time zones. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are. But if you head to the TOEC website, we have an event page on the virtual hour record. But that is essentially we're running that as a test event for the VWTTC. And I've run various tests anyway, so I know everything's working fine. But we want to run a test event with people, challenging the server and things like that. A whole load of other people on the server. So that's next Wednesday, guys. I'd really recommend coming to that. It's also a really great way of getting some FTP data, because an hour full gas is what your FTP is, your functional threshold power. It's the power that you should be able to hold for a full 60 minutes. So it's about as good FTP test as you can do, short of going to a lab and doing lactate testing. But yeah,
Actually, I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is the bike choice in Indy Velo, does it make any difference?
No. So it's not like Zwift, guys. If you can have a Tron bike, it won't make any difference. But you got to make sure that your personal details are correct. So weight and height and things like that. But the bike doesn't make any difference. Nor does the kit. You'll be pleased to hear. So everybody's equal in that sense. Okay. If you have any questions after the fact, guys, do feel free to email the TOEIC account. We're very busy at the moment, as you can imagine, so we are being a bit slow to respond, and I apologise for that. But we are very busy getting things ready, and we've got some other events coming up as well. So there's a lot going on at once, so apologies if we're a bit slow to respond to anyone. We will get back to you, but do feel free.
I do have a couple of procedural questions.
Yeah, of course.
But I could wait till later if you want.
I'm very happy for you to ask your questions. If I can actually answer them, it's helpful for anybody on the session or watching the recording. So if you have any...
Each of the 24-hour events I've done, the files have gotten so big that the post-race posting was a real problem for the organization.
Yeah.
Does Indy Velo think they have that under control?
Yeah, so that shouldn't be an issue. It's actually, I'm glad you raised that, actually. I will double check it. But that shouldn't be an issue. The reason with RGT we had the issue was because they were not only sending what's called a fit file, they were trying to send another file which was much larger, and so it was getting stuck in people's mailbox download limits. Fit files are actually very small, so we shouldn't have an issue with that. I will double check with George at Indivelo. But yeah, that's a really good question actually. Let me just make a note of that. So I'm just writing that down. Did you have any other? Yeah, did you say the other?
Actually, I had one other question.
Yeah, of course.
At the start of last year's RGT race, there was about half a dozen of us that just sat there when everybody else took off because something timed out, and it took about 3 minutes to get going. Do you think that there's a timeout or any of that sort of stuff on Indy Velo at the start?
Right. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. No, that shouldn't be an issue. As far as I'm aware. So what Harold's referring to is that on RGT you used to get kicked off a server if you were stationary for too long. I think from the testing that I've done, where I've done bot races and had my avatar's been static, and I've run them for 10 hours so far. Gonna do a full 24-hour tomorrow, I think. What day are we on? Wednesday. Yeah. I've not come across it as an issue so far because my avatar was static and I was just using the camera to kind of run through the bots and check everything. So I don't anticipate that being an issue. What that does bring me on to is the pen. So the pen for race start, like in a real world race, you got the pen. They usually do it sort of 10 minutes before. The pen on Indy Velo will open 25 minutes before race start. Okay, so you can't join it before 25 minutes, and it closes. Probably most importantly, it closes 1 minute before. So do not leave it literally to the last minute because you will not be able to join. Okay. Hopefully nobody will be leaving it that late. I think really, my advice is common sense in terms of when the event codes go out, get signed up early so that you can make sure it appears in your calendar. Get signed up to the event in Indivelo early. Join as soon as the pen goes live, 25 minutes before, and yeah, get everything set up. But as Harold says, you shouldn't have any issues in terms of your avatar getting booted out if it stays still for too long. We've not come across that as an issue. One caveat I would like to emphasize is Indy Velo is a new platform. Okay, we don't know everything about it yet. With Wahoo at RGT, we were pretty familiar. We have been using it for years. Although they kept bringing out new quirks every time they updated, which was hard work for us. Whereas Indivelo is very new and it's developing very quickly. They have developed this functionality, this time challenge functionality for us, specifically for us. We're testing it as much as we can. I don't foresee any issues, if I'm honest. But it's only when, you know, you're at race pace that these sort of things start to arise. Our biggest thing, guys, is just don't panic. Like, there are always workarounds. We're pretty good at coming up with solutions and compromises. So just, if something goes wrong tech-wise, guys, don't panic. Okay, we will get something sorted. Yeah, so that'll be my main message. But
how would we let you know if there's an issue that comes up in real time?
So there will be a Zoom room. It won't run for. It might run. It wouldn't run for the full 24 hours, but we'll be taking it in shifts, keeping track of everything. So we'll be across email. We'll be across social media, but I would suggest email is probably the quickest because we will be across that. Or if the Zoom room is up, use that to communicate with us, much like this. I don't think we plan to run it for the full 24 hours, but we'll be running it for a lot of things, for a lot of the time. Okay?
Okay, thank you. That was all the questions I had.
Okay, no worries. Okay, cool. Cheers to that, Harold. That's really helpful. Those are all very good questions. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of how to manage yourself outside of pacing for the different championships. Now there is a really good video on our YouTube channel that we hosted a seminar last year with Total Endurance Nutrition, who are our kind of nutritional consultants. They're really good, and that video I'm not going to rehash because that video is much better than I would be able to regurgitate. So particularly for those doing the 12 and 24 hour race, I would implore you to watch that video on our YouTube channel, Total Endurance Nutrition. It should be well labelled, so you should find that on our YouTube channel. For the 3 and 6 hour guys, you're very much more in my ballpark. I'm a triathlon cycling coach. I look after a lot of Ironman athletes. So that I've got a very good knowledge of in terms of pacing and nutrition and stuff. For the nutrition for like ultra endurance athletes, like the 12 and 24 hours, definitely watch that Total Endurance Nutrition seminar. But there are some general points. Okay, so just like a basic underpinning to your knowledge, your body, when it is well stocked, you've carbo loaded, you have about enough glycogen in your muscle and livers for about an hour to an hour and a half's exercise. Okay, and how quickly you use up that glycogen depends on the intensity. So these are all going to be low intensity races or lower intensity races, even at 3 hours. So yeah, you've probably got just a little bit more than an hour's worth of glycogen in you from the start, which means before the hour is up, it doesn't matter which of the championships you're doing, you're going to be needing to fuel. All right, and because it is a lower intensity event, you can be a little bit more you can take a few more risks in terms of what you eat, and you want to include variety. So you don't just want to be fueling with gels, I would suggest. But as I say, watch that Total Endurance Nutrition video. But all of the championships, you are going to need to plan ahead with your fueling and hydration. Okay, so the fueling, as you're coming up towards an hour before, start fueling. As a general rule, you want up to around 100 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Okay, if you've not been practicing with that, you're probably looking for somewhere between 70 and that 100 grams of carb per hour. So use that to plan how much food you have with you. Okay, on the hydration front, that is probably the area where I think people make the biggest mistakes, because it's intuitive that you're going to need to eat, but the hydration side of things perhaps isn't dealt with in as a disciplined way. Now with the hydration, one of the things you've got to really bear in mind is that because you're training indoors, the ambient environment is probably going to be a bit hotter than you might realise, and it's going to be a lot more humid, because you breathe out. When you breathe out, you release quite a lot of moisture into the air, and over time your room's going to fill with that moisture. So firstly, make sure you've got really good ventilation. Okay, worry about ventilation before you worry about fans. Fans are not ventilation. They might help cool your skin, but they will not circulate air in the room properly. They'll just move it around. What we want is fresh air coming in, and moisture and carbon dioxide laden air to be pushed out the window. Okay, so make sure you sort out ventilation as a priority. And then when it comes to taking on fluids, plain water on its own is probably not going to hydrate you as efficiently as you need. Okay, so water on its own will sit in your stomach for longer than you would want. So basically you're going to dehydrate quicker than water alone will rehydrate you, which means you need vectors to help water cross your gastrointestinal tract. So that means carbohydrate, sodium. All right, so to simplify that, basically what you want to do, guys, is when you have fluids just for hydrating, you want to make sure it's either a hydration drink with a low carb concentration or an electrolyte drink. Personally, I would just make sure you have got some electrolyte tabs and your bottled water is got an electrolyte in it. Then when you're eating, that is when plain water makes sense, because that water is going to dilute the food that you're putting into your stomach, help you digest it more easily, and the carbohydrate in that food, the sodium in that food, and the water will work together to pass across your gastrointestinal tract. So when you're eating, plain water is good. When you're not eating, you want an electrolyte drink or low carbohydrate hydration drink. Okay, that will help you stay on top of your fluids. In terms of quantity, as a general rule, you're looking for about 500 mils of fluid an hour. So you can see that's going to be a lot of fluids, and that I think is the area where people struggle, is just with the sheer quantity of fluids that you require. So have a real think about that and have a strategy for how you're going to replenish those fluids, either through a helper or having planned breaks. And just moving away from fueling and hydration a little bit, my advice to you, for those guys who are doing the 12 and 24 hour championships, plan your breaks. Okay, make sure you know when you're going to do it, because if it's part of the plan, it takes the anxiety out getting off the bike and worrying about, oh, I'm not moving, I'm not progressing. Okay, so yeah, plan your breaks. For the 3 and 6 hour championships, you're probably not going to need much in the way of breaks. For the 6 hour one, you might need to hop off quickly to go to the loo, but I would suggest really for those championships, you shouldn't need too much in the way of breaks if you've planned things properly. For the 12 and 24 hour races, you definitely need a break. And don't wait until you're suffering before you start to take breaks. You know, maybe do it, maybe take a break every 2 hours, every 3 hours, whatever it is, but make it reasonable. You don't want to be dragging yourself to the end of your shift to then think, oh, finally I've gotten to my break. Because what you want really is to be constantly chipping away at that discomfort, so that hopefully it's only like the final hours where that discomfort really starts to dig in, and you've got to dig in mentally, okay? So plan your breaks, make sure they're reasonable. You don't want your shifts to be too aggressive, too long. You want to be chipping away at that fatigue, because ultimately your average power will be higher if you are just kind of chipping away at that discomfort, at that fatigue. Okay, so plan those breaks, use them properly. Try not to spend too long off the bike when you take a break. I would suggest a maximum of 10-15 minutes, because otherwise you will experience it when you stop off at the cafe on a long ride. You get cafe legs, and then basically what that is your body switching into recovery mode. You've got your muscles get cold and they start focusing on rebuilding your muscles and replenishing your glycogen stores. So yeah, don't take too long of breaks. That old saying, you know, little and often, it's a true one in this context. Okay.
And I presume from what you said at the start about a timeout, there is no timeout on if you take a break for like half an hour.
Yeah, as far as we're aware, there isn't. Because as I say, I've run tests where my avatar's been stationary for 10 hours and nothing has happened, not been booted out. So shouldn't be an issue. As I say, it was something I'll double check with George, the founder of Indivelo. But as far as we're aware, it's not an issue. But whilst you might not have any issues in terms of being kicked off a server, you know, there are other potential issues like your computer freezing, you know, that sort of thing, if it's left idle for too long. So again, you know, I just keep, you know, I wouldn't go too far from your computer. But if something does happen, guys, if you do get booted out or your computer freezes, don't panic, okay? Message us, we'll get you started again. The solution will probably be just to get you doing a free ride on the same course, and then we can, you know, piece things back together after the session. All right, so any issues, don't panic, guys. They're almost certainly solvable. Okay?
So about the nutrition thing,
Yeah.
if we're doing a 12 or 24-hour event, does your body, if you're riding in zone 2, does it replenish the stores of your glycose along the way so that you could maybe surge to 3 or 4 for a while just to change the pace and then go back? And does it replenish those stores?
So the simple answer is not to the extent that you would like, basically. So when your different energy systems, like the different sources of energy that you use, glucose, fat and protein, so carbohydrate, fat and protein, your body uses all three sources all at the same time, but the proportion of each of those sources differs depending on the length and duration of your event. So you shouldn't ever really be using a ton of protein, but with ultra endurance events, you get a lot. You do see an uptick in protein metabolism, and that's structural protein. That's, you know, that's your muscles breaking down basically. So that, in order to kind of mitigate that and stop your body using a greater percentage of the protein, make sure you're really on top of that that carbohydrate intake. Whilst at a zone 2 level, that low intensity level, your body will lean heavily on using fat for energy, but it still will be using quite a lot of carbohydrate. So you cannot rely on fat alone, which is why, yeah, you have to be careful both in terms of how hard you go, but then also feeding in that constant drip feeding of carbohydrate. And all that will happen is if you decide to do, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 minutes at zone 4, all that's going to happen is you're going to burn through your glycogen stores more quickly. So it can put you in quite a bad place in terms of your blood glucose levels and your
And I presume that you can take in too many carbohydrates in an hour. You're not feeling very good or something.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically you could. I think you might struggle because basically you'll just get anything that goes in. There's not going to be enough time to provoke an insulin response. That glucose is going to be shunted straight into your muscles, your working muscles. So I think, yeah, less worrying about how much, about eating too much. You basically just don't want to eat stupid foods. So, you know, like fast food and things like that are heavily laden with fat. Because you eat lots of fat and lots of protein, that slows down how quickly your body can break it down. Which is why you want your focus predominantly to be on high carbohydrate foods. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No worries, man. Cool. No, these are good questions, though. Good questions. One question you might have might be in terms of what foods to eat. The answer I would suggest is for the 3 and 6 hour races, you really want very simple sugars because you want that sugar to get into that glucose to get into your system as quickly as possible. So that's when you rely on gels, energy bars, bananas, you know, those things that you know don't have much fiber to them and can be absorbed very quickly. As you get to the 12 and 24 hour events, you can vary it a little bit more. So, and you definitely, when you're doing 12 and 24 hours, you want variety. Okay, so you don't want just sweet foods. So you want them still to be very much carbohydrate focused, but you don't just want them to be gels and energy bars for the full 12 or 24 hours because you'll go mad. Okay, you'll get taste fatigue. You're sick of the sweetness, and so yeah, plan for, in the same way you plan for breaks, plan for different types of foods. So a common one that some Ironman athletes will use is they'll sneak a couple of like salted potatoes in like salted new potatoes into their bento box or something, just to change up the flavor profile. A bit of saltiness backed up with that carbohydrate. You know, I wouldn't suggest fueling entirely on salted potatoes, but it will just give you a little bit of a lift, tasting something different, tasting something, you know, a bit more palatable. So go for variety. You still want it to be carbohydrate focused, so other foods like flapjack, low fat flapjack, so more like granola bars rather than full fat flapjack, because as I say, it does contain a lot of fat, so it will delay how quickly you can absorb the carbohydrate in it. But yeah, I mean, a bit of flapjack every now and then just to give you a lift, yeah, it's good. You know, ultimately there is a huge psychological aspect to these types of races. So doing something naughty just to give you a boost, there's nothing against that. Also, you just got to get yourself to the finish line. So yeah, follow the general rules, but you know, just throw in a couple of treats every now and then. Now, often we get asked about caffeine. So the Total Endurance Nutrition Seminar on our YouTube channel talks a bit about caffeine. So my personal advice would be to use it sparingly. Okay, so the thing about caffeine is it will trigger a bowel movement. One, it's a diuretic, so it will dehydrate you a bit. But it will also trigger a bowel movement. And so, yeah, it will make you want to go to the toilet. Which isn't the worst thing, you know. You're going to need to go to the toilet at some point. So, again, use it strategically. Don't take on too much. I think, if I remember correctly, the seminar talks more specifics about how many milligrams of caffeine they would advise. I can't remember what the number is off the top of my head. But yeah, be careful. Although you're going to be knackered and not sleeping for the 12 and 24 hour ones, caffeine isn't necessarily going to be your friend on that one. Okay? Particularly if you don't use caffeine a lot anyway. So if you're not training with caffeine a lot, it's going to have a greater impact on you. So yeah, be sparing with the caffeine, guys. Okay. So we've just got about 3Ks left of the course. As you see, guys, like it's a pretty straightforward course. You got the little rise in there, which I think will be very welcome. I know if I may well do one of the championships just to help with the live stream. But I don't know if I was thinking about doing the 12 or 24 hour events, for me, I'd be really glad for that little rise, just to break up the course. And it's also an opportunity to roll down the other side. So make use of it.
So on the right-hand side, we have the local leaderboard. Is there a website that's going to have kind of the global leaderboard?
I'm afraid not, no, because we were originally going to be using Wahoo RGT. They were our partners, and then Wahoo shut down RGT without any warning. So our technical process when it comes to Indie Velo are still quite early days. So there will be a leaderboard for the individual championships. So each championship we run on a different server. So if you're on the 6 hour championship, all the 6 hour people will be on the same race, and you'll see each other and be able to gauge how far apart you are. So I know that was something which was frustrating about last year, was that you couldn't tell how far apart you were. But that should be different this year on Indie Velo. So you'll be able to see for the individual championships. So last kilometre and a half left of the course. Just a reminder, guys, if you've got any questions, just drop us a line and we'll seek to help you. But hopefully, Harold's been asking some great questions, so hopefully that's answered a lot of them for people. Other points that we need to raise, let me just have a quick check on my notes. Bear with me 1 second. I've got so many tabs open up. Right. Okay, yeah, so just to run through the different events quickly and how they kind of work, how you join the event. So much like for this workshop, guys, on the day, so the event starts at 6 p.m. GMT, okay, so UK time, 6 p.m. And we will provide on the day the joining links, the access code, similar to what you've had to use for the workshops. Okay, you go to profile and Indie Velo, you go to your race license, you enter the access code, and then the event will appear in the events calendar. The server will go live 25 minutes before, the server closes in a minute before. Okay, For the team relay, you'll be doing it in 2-hour stints. So you guys, the team relay, will get 3 access codes. So there'll essentially be 3 back-to-back races. So you'll need to make sure each of you picks one of those event codes and tallies up with the time. So you'll do one ride. The first rider will do 2 hours. Then the next 2 hours will start, and then the third 2 hours at the end. Okay, and then we compile the distances for each team at the end. Yeah, so you don't need to mess around with usernames. Just make sure your username reflects what your real name is. So ideally no like gamer pseudonyms or anything. My name's Richard Akers, so my name in Velo should be Richard Akers. So that we can pick out each rider. Okay, so that's the course finished. We're just covering any final moments, final things.
So actually on screen, will the 24-hour riders be able to see like the 6 and 12 and 3-hour riders? No.
They'll be on different events.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. It's the only way that we can run it with any accuracy is everybody, because the event is time limited. It's a time challenge, so so there'll be a different access code for the different championships. Okay.
That was nice with RGT because then you had more people to interact with. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, no, I do. It was something we thought hard about, but just in terms of practicalities and collecting results, that it just meant that we couldn't do it with any level of accuracy because we'd have to rely on people stopping their ride at exactly the right time, and then we would have to manually go through and get the exact correct point. So it makes a lot more sense doing it this way, and hopefully over the event will build in terms of popularity in time. Hopefully now we've got a stable platform that will actually stick around. I think that's probably it in terms of what I needed to cover. But if anyone's got any last questions or any questions after the event, just give us a shout and we'll seek to answer those questions. Okay. Right. Well, thanks very much for your time, guys. We will, if we don't see you before, we'll see you on. We'll see you next week for the race. But thanks very much for your time, everyone.